Pretty interesting article here on Black Agenda Report. I'll link it down below. Author is Joe Emsberger. Title is To Western Media, Prosecuting Bolivian Coup Leaders is Worse Than Leading a Coup. And it just goes into the complete 180, or the silence or the support most, if not all, Western corporate media outlets gave for the coup in Bolivia. And now they're crying these crocodile tears when the people responsible for this coup that led to, a lot of people dying, they're actually being held accountable. And now the Western media is, oh, this is so fucked up. This is authoritarian. How dare you? How dare you prosecute the people that murdered innocent civilians and protesters during this illegal coup? How dare you, Bolivia? How dare you hold these people accountable? The Guardian pretends not to understand the difference between overthrowing a government in Bolivia and arresting someone for overthrowing a government. Once in power, Áñez immediately promised security forces legal immunity as they massacred dozens of protesters. One can imagine an editor of the London-based Guardian shaking her head sadly as she typed the headline, Cycle of Retribution takes Bolivia's ex-president from palace to prison cell. The subhead told readers Janine Áñez's government once sought to jail the country's former leader Evo Morales for terrorism and sedition. Now she faces the same charges. And again, there is no basis for those charges against Evo Morales, but there are substantial evidence for those charges to be placed on Janine Áñez for her role in that coup and giving illegal immunity to massacring dozens of fucking protesters. The Guardian article by Tom Phillips wants us to lament an alleged incapacity of Bolivian government to stop persecuting opponents once they take office. We were told that Áñez's government did it, and now that the government president Luis Arce, elected in a landslide on October 18th, is also doing it. And again, he is the also part of the MAS party, the movement towards socialism, I believe it's called. The same party that Evo Morales is a part of as well. So hugely popular party. The article's premise is a lie, and the Liberal Guardian has hardly been the only outlet spreading it, with help from Jose Miguel Vivancio, America's director of Human Rights Watch. Human Rights Watch is trash, so is The Guardian. I don't recommend getting your news or analysis from either of those sources, whom Phillips quoted. Team effort between Western media and NGOs like HRW often reinforces the views of the U.S. government, for sure. Áñez was a U.S.-backed dictator installed after a military coup sent democratically elected President Evo Morales fleeing Bolivia for his life on November 10, 2019. Once in power, Áñez immediately promised security forces legal immunity as they massacred dozens of protesters. She is now charged with terrorism in addition to sedition and criminal conspiracy over her attempt to keep power by terrorizing the public. Her arrest is good news to people who support democracy and human rights. Yes, I agree. I'm not a huge fan of the carceral system, but for fuck's sake, people who try to overthrow the democratically elected government of Evo Morales, and unfortunately they were successful in doing so, and led to the massacre of a number of people, should be held accountable for that, including Áñez, obviously. But now, as when the coup took place in 2019, the most obvious conclusions are evaded when they are incompatible with U.S. foreign policy. It should surprise nobody that U.S. officials have made statements depicting her arrest as political persecution, but they weren't saying that when, because again, they were completely in support of this corrupt, completely unelected coup government of Janine Áñez, because she was willing, ready and willing to do the bidding of the U.S. empire and other Western imperial interests, something that the Morales and Arce government have not, and I don't think will be willing to do, because they are anti-imperialist, they're anti-capitalist, they're anti-colonialist. Áñez supports all three of those. fighting to spring an ex-dictator, and downgrading the coup that installed Áñez to a mere allegation made against Áñez. Reuters, the Financial Times, the WAPO, CNN, and Canada's National Post have all run articles quoting HRW's Vivenco criticizing arrest. CNN quoted him. The arrest warrant against Áñez and her ministers do not contain any evidence they have committed the crime of terrorism. For this reason, they generate well-founded doubts that is a process based on political motive. I mean, Jesus Christ. Human Rights Watch giving cover for the fucking Áñez government and the massacres that they perpetrated against the Bolivian people who were standing up, fighting back against this fucking disgusting, illegal, violent coup attempt. Human Rights Watch is fucking trash. Oh my god. Don't donate to them. Don't get your analysis of foreign events or domestic events from them. They are fucking horrible. The WAPO article, whose headline alleged a crackdown on opposition, used a shorter version of the same quote, Vivenco. While all the articles describe the coup as an allegation, a fucking allegation, CNN stands out for getting the most ridiculous with its denialism. Then head of the Bolivian Armed Forces, Commander William Calamon, asked Morales to step down to restore stability and peace. Morales acquiesced on November 10th for the good of Bolivia. That's a fucking military coup. The military literally told him to step down. We're not gonna support you anymore. That's a fucking coup. Not Jesus Christ. But political allies maintain he was removed from power as part of a coup orchestrated by conservatives, including Áñez. Did Calamon need to be filmed putting a gun directly to Morales' head for CNN to admit it was a coup? Even then, they were like, this is for the good of the Bolivian people. He didn't pull the trigger. It was just a threat. Adding to the disinformation loop from his own platform on Twitter, Vivenco spread an American Quarterly op-ed by Raul Penaranda that announces the rest of Áñez. Penaranda once said that Bolivia's democracy was saved the day that Morales was overthrown, and his recent op-ed depicts the November 2019 coup attempt as a legal transfer of power. I mean, Jesus Christ. Fuck. In 2019, the military publicly urged Morales to resign. It's a fucking coup. I mean, Jesus Christ. How completely out of touch with reality do you have to be to consume this fucking dog shit and believe it to be what's actually happened? That's why, again, you need to be very careful where you consume your news and analysis and reporting from. Actually get it from real independent leftist outlets like Black Agenda Report, like The Gray Zone, like Mint Press News. So you're not going to get this type of, obviously, analysis or coverage from CNN, American Quarterly, WAPO, Human Rights Watch, Financial Times, Reuters, Guardian, etc. They're all more or less mouthpieces for the U.S. government, the U.S. empire, and other, Western imperial interests. 2019, the military publicly urged Morales to resign, as both the military and police made clear they would not protect him from violent right-wing protests or some who ransacked his house. Áñez, a right-wing senator whose Senate party received only 4% of the national vote in 2019 legislative elections, had the presidential sash placed on her by military men with lawmakers from Evo Morales' party, Movimiento El Socialism, or MAS, Movement Towards Socialism. Majority in the legislature were absent, some hiding, others refused to attend without guarantees of their safety and their families. Stay hydrated. Ignoring all that, the Guardian article by Tom Phillips refers to claims the former Senator Áñez was involved in plotting. Only involved. The right-wing coup that Bolivia's current government claims brought her to power. My emphasis. Editors are usually a big fan of concision. The highlighted word should have been deleted, and added benefit would have been accuracy. Yes. Of course, it's easier to deny that Áñez was involved in plotting the coup that put her in power, hardly a stretch, if you do not accept that a coup took place. Oh my god. Reuters placed scare quotes around the word coup. Coup, it's coup, kind of, maybe a coup, maybe not, in headlines about Áñez's arrest. Bolivian ex-president Áñez begins 4-month detention over coup allegation. I mean, Jesus. Bolivian ex-president Áñez jail term as rights group slam coup. I mean, Jesus Christ. Again, do you not get your news or analysis from these fucking corporate rags that are just tools of imperialism, which is international capitalism? Reuters and CNN also uncritically reported the thoroughly debunked pretext for the coup. CNN reported, though an international audit would later find the results of the 2020 election could not be validated because it's serious. And that was by the OAS, the Organization of American States, which is, again, just another mouthpiece for the U.S. empire, and there wasn't actually any irregularities there at all. Morales declared himself the winner, prompting massive protests around the country. The international audit is the OAS's widely debunked report, yes. Reuters simply stated that the OAS was an official monitor of the 2019 election and found it fraudulent. Cycle of dishonesty. The coup was incited by transparently dishonest claims repeatedly made by OAS monitors about the presidential election won by Morales in October 2019. Again, probably at the behest of the U.S. government, because, again, they were no fans of the Evo Morales, democratically elected Evo Morales government, because the Morales government was actually concerned with the betterment of the working class, particularly the indigenous population in Bolivia. They weren't going to let in all these, multinational corporations in to, destroy the environment, as well as, destroying the working class, something that Áñez instituted basically as soon as she, took power in this coup. In D.C., the Washington, D.C. based Center for Economic Policy and Research immediately pointed out this was utter nonsense. But in the crucial months following Morales' ouster, outlets like Reuters constantly shielded the OAS from devastating criticism. Eventually, expert criticism of OAS continually mounted and disrupted the media silence. Details from the election results in 2020, in which Evo Morales' party triumphed by an even greater margin than 2019, further exposed OAS's dishonesty. Like Reuters, the widely quoted Jose Miguel Vivanco of HRW spread fraud claims when it mattered most in 2019. The day after election won by Morales, Vivanco tweeted in Spanish that everything indicates that Evo intended to steal the election. As late as December 2019, Kenneth Roth, he's fucking trash. HRW Executive Director Ken Roth was also promoting OAS's claims without the slightest trace of skepticism. Months into the murderous, illegitimate rule of Áñez, Vivanco explicitly referred to Bolivia as a democracy. He did so in a Spanish-language interview with Brujala Digital, an outlet edited by Raul Penaranda, the coup supporter whose American Quarterly op-ed Vivanco recently promoted on Twitter. Meanwhile, on Twitter, Vivanco constantly refers to the governments of President Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela, President Daniel Ortega in Nicaragua, two democratically elected presidents the U.S. government wants overthrown as dictatorship. Again, you see how these outlets and these NGOs, these nonprofits like Human Rights Watch, violently, in the most vociferous ways condemn, the Maduro government in Venezuela or the Ortega government in Nicaragua, as this author rightly points out, two regimes that the U.S. wants to overthrow. U.S. is sanctioning Venezuela right now, leading to tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people dying as a result. I believe there's also sanctions on the government on Nicaragua as well, because again, both of those countries are socialist, leftist leaning. They're actually trying to look out and better the working class in those populations. But it's completely different when the coup attempt happened in Bolivia. That was the Áñez regime restoring democracy is back, and it wasn't actually a coup. Evo was trying to steal the election. It's a joke, man. It's a fucking joke. New York Times Ed Board openly supported the coup that ousted Morales, and so-called paper record is the record of their fucking being stenographers for the U.S. State Department and U.S. Empire. The forced ouster of an elected leader, by definition, a setback to democracy, and so a moment of risk. But when a leader resorts to brazenly abusing the power and institutions put in care by electorate, as President Evo Morales did in Bolivia, he is who sheds his legitimacy, and forcing him out often becomes the only remaining option. This is what the Bolivians have done, and what remains is to hope that Mr. Morales goes peacefully in exile in Mexico and to help Bolivia restore its wounded. Jesus Christ. So, predictably enough, the Times article about recent Áñez arrest referred vaguely to the utterly debunked OAS fraud claim of contested vote count, and took the same kind of dishonest stance as HRW and other Western media by equating U.S.-backed dictatorship to democratically elected government whose ouster the U.S. supported. Both Mr. Morales and Mrs. Áñez used the judiciary to go after their... they have no fucking balance. Jesus Christ. Have some journalistic integrity. But I guess if you did, you probably wouldn't be working at the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, Reuters, Human Rights Watch, Financial Times, etc., right? The WAPO editorial board came out with a wild defense of Áñez headlined, "The Bolivian government is on a lawless course. Its democracy must be preserved." Most ominously, the editorial said, "The Biden administration should lead a regional effort to preserve democratic stability in this long-suffering..." So, another fucking coup attempt? "Lest crisis turn in catastrophe. Informed people may laugh at this for a few seconds so they remember that Bolivia's people could eventually face lethal U.S. sanctions for daring to hold murderers to account. Left unchallenged, that's catastrophe. That's the catastrophe that propaganda like this could bring about. Brutal dictators supported by Washington have no reason to doubt that establishment journalists and big NGOs, i.e. Human Rights Watch, will try very hard to keep them out of jail. Removing the threat of U.S.-backed coups from the world will involve a constant struggle against Western media and the sources they present to us as reliable." Joe Ermsberger, Canadian-based writer, work has appeared in Telesur English, ZNet, and Counterpunch. Boom. Again, it's not surprising that these corporate media outlets, who again are just mouthpieces for the U.S. State Department, U.S. Empire, imperialism, which is, U.S. State Department, U.S. Empire, imperialism, international capitalism, that they don't like that the Áñez regime is being held accountable by the democratically elected government of Luis Arce in Bolivia, and that, they're also, calling the Maduro and Ortega governments of Venezuela and Nicaragua, dictators, and wanting those overthrown. But it's, again, very, very disgusting to see. It appears like so many people in these corporate media outlets have literally no journalistic integrity or ethics whatsoever, and they're completely willing to go along with these completely debunked and ridiculous claims if it benefits them professionally and if it's in support of the U.S. empire and U.S. imperialism. That's why, again, be very careful where you consume your news and analysis from. Otherwise, they're going to have you believing this bullshit that can have very hugely disastrous consequences, both domestically and abroad. So be careful. Again, a couple of sources I really like: Black Agenda Reports, really good. Mint Press News, The Gray Zone. What else? True Thought's pretty decent. Common Dreams is pretty decent. Yeah, those are just a couple of mine. What are some of your go-to sources for independent news and analysis? Like the video if you like the damn video. Subscribe for more content. All part of the people. Peace. Much love.